Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going on this really fascinating journey into the mechanics of human connection.
Yeah, and more specifically, how we actually handle conflict.
Right, exactly. We're pulling insights from a really compelling guide by the team at Talent Whisperers. They focus on this concept called curiosity reciprocity.
It's such a great framework.
It really is. And the mission for our exploration with you today is, well, it's pretty ambitious. We want to uncover how to actually transform entrenched conflict into genuine connection.
Which is something I think everyone listening can relate to needing in their lives.
Oh, 100%. And to kick things off, there's this classic Zen story that I think perfectly captures the core problem we're trying to solve here.
The story of the empty cup.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So picture this university professor. He's this incredibly brilliant, accomplished guy, and he decides to visit a famous Zen master named Nanin.
Okay.
So the professor claims he's there to inquire about Zen, but, once he sits down, he just starts talking.
Just completely dominating the conversation.
Yeah. Right. He's listing his theories, outlining his philosophies, detailing his many, many accomplishments. And Nanin just sits quietly and begins to serve tea.
As one does.
As one does, he pours the hot tea into the professor's cup until it reaches the very brim, but then he doesn't stop.
He just keeps pouring.
He just keeps going. The tea spills over the edge, it runs across the table, drips all over the floor, and finally the professor, he just can't take the mess anymore and shouts, it's over full, no more will go in.
I love the visual of that.
It's so good. And Nanin simply looks at him and says, like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?
It is, it's such a striking image. And it really captures the modern epidemic we're looking at today. This idea of defensive certainty.
Defensive certainty.
Yeah, because we see this everywhere, right? You sit down for a meeting or, you're at a holiday dinner with family.
Well, the holiday dinners, the
Yeah.
ultimate test.
Exactly. And the person across the table is just so brimming with their own rightness that there literally isn't room for a single drop of new information.
Right.
And the Talent Whisperers framework, it argues that before we can resolve any conflict, we have to figure out how to empty that cup.
But not by forcing it, I assume.
Right. Not by using clever debate tactics to, knock the cup out of their hand. It has to be through a profound physiological and relational shift.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when we encounter someone with an overflowing cup, our default assumption is usually that we're dealing with a permanent personality trait.
Yes, exactly. We label them.
We do. We divide the world into two rigid categories, open-minded people and closed-minded people.
Right.
We think, well, my uncle is just a stubbornly defensive person. That's who he is. But the data from the guide kind of flips this idea completely on its head.
It totally does. People are not fixed types.
Right, we all constantly move back and forth between curiosity and defensiveness. And it depends on the context, the stakes of the conversation, whether our core identity feels threatened.
It's not about personality at all. It's about posture.
Posture, I really like that framing.
And posture is incredibly contagious. Defensiveness invites defensiveness. Attack invites counterattack. But crucially, curiosity invites curiosity.
It's almost like yawning, if you think about it.
Oh, that's a really interesting way to put it.
Oh, yeah, like you might think someone is just a naturally closed-off person, but maybe they're just mirroring the tense posture in the room. If defensiveness is a contagious yawn, genuine curiosity is, I don't know, the fresh air that wakes the room up.
That's spot on.
Sure.
What's fascinating here is the distinction between a genuine internal stance and a superficial conversational trick.
Oh, right. You can't just fake it.
You really can't. You
Yeah.
can't just slap a question mark onto the end of an accusation and expect the fresh air to flow.
Yeah.
People possess an incredibly sensitive radar for what the framework calls performative curiosity.
Oh, the interrogation disguised as a question. Like, why on earth would you think that marketing strategy was a good idea?
Exactly that tone. When curiosity is deployed as a tactical weapon to steer someone toward your own predetermined conclusion, it backfires spectacularly.
Because they can feel it.
Right? It feels like a trap. It actually reinforces the exact defensiveness loop you were trying to break.
So what does genuine curiosity actually look like then?
Genuine curiosity is an invitation. It's an exploration of the how rather than a judgment of the what. You're essentially asking, how did you come to see the world this way? What experiences built that framework for you?
Wow. Okay.
You are shifting the entire interaction from two static, entrenched positions into a shared unfolding path.
And I guess when someone feels that the journey leading to their belief is being respected, they're way more likely to extend that exact same respect backward to you.
Precisely. As the reciprocity part of curiosity, reciprocity.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it's easy to nod along and think of this as just a nice psychological theory, a soft communication skill.
Right, the touchy-feely stuff.
Exactly. But the research takes us straight into hard biology. There are two entirely distinct biological loops happening inside our bodies during any disagreement.
The biology is where it gets wild. Let's look at the defensiveness loop first.
Okay.
When you encounter a perspective that feels threatening, especially if it challenges your identity or, your sense of belonging to your group, your brain doesn't just process it as a bad idea.
It processes it as literal physical danger, right?
Yes, the amygdala is the brain's threat detector, and it flags that incoming dissenting opinion as a predator.
A predator. That's crazy.
Instantly, the hypothalamus activates the HTA axis, and your bloodstream is just flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. Your body is moving into fight, flight, or freeze.
Wow.
And the cognitive effects of this cascade are staggering. Your attention narrows drastically to focus only on the threat. Your ability to learn and form new memories drops off a cliff because cortisol actively suppresses the hippocampus.
Just totally shuts down learning.
Right. Meanwhile, social pain is actively registering in your anterior cingulate cortex.
Whoa, hold on. The anterior cingulate cortex. Break that down for me. Are you saying the brain processes someone disagreeing with my political opinion the exact same way it processes a physical injury? Like a broken arm?
That is precisely what the neuroscience suggests.
That is unbelievable.
But from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes total sense. Human beings survived by belonging to a tribe. Being ostracized or rejected by the group meant you were alone on the savannah, which meant death.
So social rejection equals death to the brain.
Exactly. So the brain evolved to treat social threat like someone attacking your deeply held beliefs as a matter of life and death. The pain pathways literally overlap.
Why?
In this flooded, cortisol-soaked state, you aren't trying to understand the other person's logic. Your nervous system is entirely organized around safety and self-protection.
It's survival mode.
Right. When you are in the defensiveness loop, even a completely neutral facial expression from the person across the table will start to look like an aggressive, mocking scowl to your brain.
Okay, so that's the defensiveness loop. And then you have the complete biological opposite, which is the curiosity loop.
Yes.
When you approach a disagreement with a genuine desire to learn, the threat signals in your brain actually soften. Your body brings dopamine into the mix.
But we need to be clear here, this isn't the dopamine hit of winning an argument or proving someone wrong.
Oh, right. Good distinction. It's the dopamine reward of discovery.
Exactly. Suddenly, a novel or conflicting idea becomes engaging instead of alarming.
And oxytocin and serotonin start flowing, which supports a feeling of trust. Your attention widens. The prefrontal cortex comes back online, giving you access to complex reasoning and nuance again.
You can actually tolerate ambiguity without panicking.
Which is huge. But this raises an important question, right? What happens when these two completely different nervous systems interact in the real world?
Well, individual nervous systems don't stay isolated once a conversation begins. They become coupled.
Coupled.
Yeah, in any interaction, you are continuously reading my microsignals. You're tracking my tone, the pace of my breath, the tension in my facial muscles, long before you consciously process the actual vocabulary I'm using.
So we're basically scanning each other.
Constantly, your nervous system is humming in the background, asking one fundamental question: am I safe?
Wait a minute. If I know that a calm tone triggers dopamine and lowers the threat level, couldn't someone just weaponize this?
What do you mean?
Let's say I read the Talent Whisperer's Guide and I decide to hack the system. Couldn't I just use a super calm, slow, Zen master voice to manipulate an employee's nervous system, even if I secretly just want to prove them wrong and win the argument?
You could try, but the biological reality is that it almost always fails.
Really?
You simply cannot fake the physiological state of non-threat because our nervous systems are processing thousands of these microsignals every single second.
So the truth leaks out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If your internal orientation is still focused on dominating the conversation or winning the debate, your body will leak those aggressive signals.
Like what?
A slightly clipped pace to your words, a micro-tightening of the jaw, an impatient sigh while they speak. The other person's amygdala will catch it instantly.
Oh, wow. So your body betrays you.
It does. That's exactly why performative curiosity falls flat. Curiosity, reciprocity only functions when you truly stabilize the interaction at a physiological level.
Because you actually mean it.
Right. When you genuinely internally release the need to be right, your body naturally sends authentic signals of non-threat. And that authentic signaling is the only thing that allows the other person's brain to feel safe enough to power down its own defensiveness loop.
So they can join you in discovery. So if we can't fake the biology, we have to genuinely want to know how the other person built their worldview. But what does that actually look like in practice?
It's a great question.
How do you establish a curiosity loop from scratch, especially in an environment where everyone is already convinced they know the absolute truth?
Well, the guide shares this brilliant real-world example from a fifth-grade classroom to answer just that.
Yeah, I loved this part.
It is a masterclass
Yeah.
in watching how certainty is formed and, more importantly, how it can be carefully examined without triggering the amygdala's defense mechanism.
So imagine it's the very first day of class. The history teacher stands up at the front of the room and asks the fifth graders a very simple, direct question. Who discovered America?
Right.
And the entire class, in total unison, shouts, Christopher Columbus.
Of course they do.
Now, the teacher could just say, wrong, open your textbooks, let me give you the real facts.
But doing that instantly triggers the cortisol.
Exactly. It triggers the feeling of being evaluated, corrected, and found lacking. The kids would immediately armor up.
So instead, the teacher uses a framework called the 5 hows.
The 5 hows.
It's a method for tracing the architecture of a belief. Instead of attacking the final conclusion, you gently explore the foundation that holds it up.
Let's walk through this slowly because the mechanics here are just fascinating. The teacher points to the most confident student in the front row and asks the first, how? How do you know that?
And the kid says, our teacher last year told us.
Right. And the teacher doesn't judge this. They just ask the second, how? How did they know?
The room gets a little quieter. A student chimes in, it was in our history book.
Third, how? How is that knowledge formed? How did the author know?
Another kid says, my dad told me he read it.
The teacher just accepts every single answer. Then comes the fourth, how? From whose perspective is that knowledge written?
And finally, the fifth, what other perspectives might exist.
It's so elegant. Within minutes, the teacher has the class looking at the history of the Americas from the perspective of the indigenous populations, the explorers, the monarchs.
But notice the mechanism of why this worked. No one in that room got defensive.
Yeah, why didn't they throw a tantrum about being told they were wrong?
Because the teacher wasn't replacing one correct story with her own competing correct story. The teacher stepped back and invited the students to explore their own mental scaffolding.
So cool.
A fixed, rigid answer organically gave way to inquiry because the threat level remained at 0.
So what does this all mean for us? It's like reverse engineering a building to see how it was constructed rather than just showing up with a wrecking ball to knock it down.
A wrecking ball. I like that.
Yeah. The wrecking ball triggers the cortisol. It communicates, you are wrong, your foundation is bad, and I am here to destroy it.
Naturally, the other person is going to defend their house.
Exactly. But reverse engineering triggers the dopamine. It communicates, look at this interesting structure you've built. Let's walk through the rooms together and see what materials were used.
And the timing in that classroom example is also really critical. The teacher utilized this framework on the very first day.
Right, setting the tone.
By doing this immediately, they set a relational contract for the rest of the year. They established a baseline expectation that authority and inherited beliefs are meant to be examined.
They aren't meant to be blindly accepted, nor are they meant to be aggressively rebelled against.
Exactly. Early signals in any relationship disproportionately shape the trajectory of what follows.
But, that teacher succeeded in large part because they controlled the room.
Yes. Power dynamics.
Right. What happens when you take that exact same 5 house framework and try to use it on your boss? Or what if you are the boss?
That brings us to the ultimate proving ground for curiosity reciprocity. Leadership and power asymmetry completely alter the biological response in a room.
So how does the guide address that?
They use a fantastic metaphor for this. Leaders function as the thermostat for a team's emotional climate.
Okay, a thermostat.
In any group setting, whether it's a corporate boardroom, a hospital ward, a community volunteer group, the early signals from the person holding the most power dictate the collective intelligence of the entire group.
Ah, I see. Most of us act like thermometers. We just read the heat in the room and match it.
Exactly.
If the person across from us gets angry and defensive, the mercury rises, and we get angry and defensive too. But a thermostat actually sets the temperature.
Right.
If the room starts getting hot, the thermostat kicks on the AC to cool it down. As a leader, your curiosity is the AC.
That is spot on. Let's imagine a high-stakes corporate scenario. You're in a Q3 planning meeting, and a junior developer raises their hand and points out a massive, expensive flaw in the VP's proposed project timeline.
Oh boy.
Right. If the VP, the person with the power, responds with defensiveness, even subtle defensiveness like a scoff or a sharp, we've already been over this, the thermostat is immediately set to threat.
And the room learns in a split second that safety is conditional.
Everyone else in that meeting learns to preemptively armor up and keep your mouth shut.
Wow.
That is the exact mechanism that leads to institutional stagnation. People start speaking only to signal compliance to the boss, not to actually solve complex problems.
Okay, but put yourself in the shoes of a new manager listening to this right now. If you're actively practicing this, if you're constantly validating everyone's paths, reverse engineering their beliefs, trying your hardest to lower threat levels, don't you risk looking like a pushover?
It's a very common fear.
Doesn't leading with curiosity make it seem like you lack conviction? Eventually, don't you have to defend a boundary and actually make a hard decision?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, practicing curiosity reciprocity does not mean all positions are equally valid.
Okay.
It certainly doesn't mean you abandon your own boundaries, and it doesn't even promise that everyone will eventually reach a happy consensus. What it requires is a fundamental sequencing shift.
Sequencing shift.
Curiosity comes first. Defense follows only if necessary.
Curiosity first, defense second.
Exactly. Because what often happens in practice is that once you apply genuine curiosity and explore the architecture of their belief, you realize the disagreement is completely different than what your amygdala initially assumed.
You might find you don't actually need to defend your position at all.
Right. But even in the cases where you do still need to hold a firm boundary or make an unpopular executive decision, your defense will land with significantly less resistance.
Because you've already established mutual regard.
Yes, you have actively lowered the physiological threat level in the room. You shifted the primary goal of the engagement from winning the interaction to understanding the interaction.
Which changes the entire dynamic of a relationship. It's really incredible how deep this goes.
It is.
So, let's look at the ground we've covered today. We started with the Zen story of the overflowing cup, realizing that defensive certainty isn't a permanent personality flaw, it's a contagious, shifting posture.
Right.
We went under the hood to look at the biology, seeing how the defensiveness loop floods our brains with cortisol and literally registers as physical pain, while the curiosity loop rewards us with dopamine and widens our perspective.
The biology is key.
We learned through the 5th grade classroom that we can't fake this physiology, but we can cultivate it by using tools like the 5 hows to reverse engineer beliefs without swinging a wrecking ball.
Beautifully said.
And finally, we saw how leaders have to act as the thermostat, using their power to set a climate where curiosity is safe for everyone.
It represents a profound reframing of how we interact with difference in every area of our lives.
It really does. So here's a practical challenge for you, the listener. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement, whether it's a high-stakes strategy meeting at work or just an argument over whose turn it is to do the dishes, pay close attention to your own physical reactions.
Yes, notice your body.
Notice your heart rate. Notice the tension in your jaw. Are you trapped in a defensiveness loop, fighting for your identity and survival? Or can you actively shift your posture, lower the threat level, and invite a curiosity loop?
And as you reflect on that challenge, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative layer from the Talent Whisperers material.
Oh,
Everything we've discussed today has been about using curiosity reciprocity on other people. But the framework notes a crucial philosophical point. Everything is a mirror.
a mirror.
Our external defensiveness is usually just a desperate attempt to protect our internal identities. So what happens when we apply this exact same biological and relational dynamic to our inner voices?
Wow, that's a heavy thought. Instead of telling my imposter syndrome to just shut up, I'm supposed to ask it how it formed that opinion.
Precisely. We all have inner critics, saboteurs, voices of profound doubt or shame that get triggered when we feel insecure. Usually, we default to the defensiveness loop internally.
We do.
We either blindly obey those negative voices or we aggressively fight them. Both reactions just tighten their grip on our nervous system. But what if you met your own inner saboteur with genuine curiosity?
Using the 5 hows on yourself.
Yes. Asking that voice, what are you so afraid of? What unfinished need or old wound are you carrying? When we meet our own internal saboteurs with curiosity reciprocity instead of armor, we don't give them ultimate authority. But we don't try to violently silence them either. We create space.
We reverse engineer our own insecurities instead of taking a wrecking ball to ourselves.
Mm.
That is incredibly difficult to do, but, you can see how necessary it is. If we can't lower the threat level inside our own minds, if we can't empty the cup inside us, we will never be able to hold anything new from the people around us.
It's the ultimate practice.
What a powerful question to sit with. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, and we'll see you next time.